This is episode 560 of the Juicebox Podcast. I'm impressed with myself. If you all knew me personally, you would be amazed that I've done this. Honestly, that I didn't get 5 minutes into it. I was like, oh, this is a lot of work. Oddly not like me, but maybe it is now. Who knows? Live, learn, right? Grow, change, etc. Friends, today I'm back with another episode of the Diabetes Variable series with Jenny Smith. Today's topic, as you saw in your podcast player, is sleep. Jenny and I will talk all about sleep and how that is a variable for your type 1 diabetes management. While we're doing that, you'll remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. And further, you'll remember to consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. Jenny Smith is a guest on the podcast, but she has a real job at IntegratedDiabetes.com, where she helps people with their diabetes in exchange for funds and goods, as capitalism works. IntegratedDiabetes.com. Ask for Jenny. Now that I'm thinking about what I just said, I don't think you can exchange goods for services with Jenny. But, you could ask. Offer her a sofa. See if she'll help you with your basal insulin. Are you a U.S. citizen who has type 1 diabetes, or a U.S. citizen who is the caregiver of someone with type 1? Please, if you are, go to t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Take the quick survey, help the podcast, help people living with type 1 diabetes. I want to put the ad right here because I don't like splitting up shorter episodes. But that's not what Contour Next One paid for, but I feel like they'd be okay with it if you guys promise just to listen to the ad. Okay. All right, you promise to listen, and I'll do this so that you get an uninterrupted episode with Jenny and I. Now, it's a clunky start, but watch how I finish. The Contour Next One blood glucose meter is top shelf. Do you understand? It is super duper accurate, incredibly easy to use, and easy to hold and transport. This means it fits in your pocket. It fits in your purse. Anywhere you need to keep your gear, the Contour Next One slides right in and doesn't get in the way. It also has an incredibly bright light for, when you're sleeping and it's dark. Boom, it lights up like a thing from a movie that we can't say because I think it's copyright infringement. And it allows the room to glow. It's as if heavenly light has shone down upon your finger. You strike it with a lance. Click, click. Blood comes out. You take the Contour Next One meter, put in the strip, touch the strip to the blood. Oh, is it not enough blood? No big deal. The strip has a second chance feature. Just get a little more blood, squeeze, 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 and go back and hit it again. You have not ruined the test strip by doing that or ruined the accuracy of the test. Second chance test strips from the Contour Next One blood glucose meter. What will they think of next? Also, the screen is incredibly easy to read. And if you would like to pair your meter to a rockin'... Who is sending me goddamn text messages in the middle of the... What? Hold on. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. If you want to pair the meter to an app, Contour Next One has a really terrific app too. So you can use it with or without the app. Last thing I want to say is that, I want to say two last things. So last thing, let's call it 1A, I want to say, is that I'm always afraid that when I talk about second chance test strips, that you'll think, oh, this thing must need so much blood, but it doesn't. It needs a very little bit. It's not a big blood drop that you need. I'm just saying that if for some reason you don't get quite enough, you can go back and get more. Okay, last part. Go to contournext.com/juicebox. There's sincerely, I'm not just trying to drive you to a link. Well, I am. I really want you to go to the link, but that's not the point. There's a lot of information at the link. So if you really want to understand all this, contournext.com/juicebox. And I'm just going to finish with this. There are a lot of you walking around with subpar meters. It's not necessary. You're already paying the money. You're paying the money for the meter. You're paying the money for the strips. You might as well get a good one. contournext.com/juicebox. Get yourself a blood glucose meter that equals your effort. You're trying, right? You need good information back from your gear. Jenny, can we do sleep as a variable for managing insulin? I don't know. I don't have a lot of feeling about this, honestly. It's not one of the things that I've noticed, but maybe I'm not looking hard enough. And when people send in variables for the list, sleep deprivation, getting good sleep versus getting bad sleep, like broken and unbroken, everybody sent that in as a variable. So I don't understand why that would impact anything.
Well, overall, sleep provides a lot in terms of recovery and build of like cellular sort of restructuring and whatnot in the overnight time period, right? We're supposed to get these waves of light sleep, deep sleep, etc., that help our body to actually then recoup and be ready for another day. When it comes in terms of type 1 management, that's one of the biggest things that most people say is, I just want better sleep. The daytime I can struggle through, manage through. If I've had good sleep overnight, I can deal with the daytime management. So from one, sleep deprivation can lead to poor overall management because you don't have as much with all that we have to manage in today's world beyond our diabetes. That's another layer that we have to consider. And if you haven't slept well, you're not going to be thinking as clearly, right? On another level, though, there are a lot of different hormones that are regulated through the sleep cycle that have relation to appetite. Okay. And the turn on, the turn off of appetite during the daytime. And so for someone, again, managing diabetes, if you are not sleeping well, it is very likely that some of those hormones that are supposed to be being managed for then transitioning into what you're craving and able to manage in terms of your intake through the course of the day, those are not going to be regulated the right way either. So There's a lot to sleep that does translate into diabetes management.
All right. So the one thing that popped into my head when I saw this as a variable was that I thought I for sure had heard that shift work could be bad for people in a way that I never expected. Like it could make you more, the way I looked it up, it says shift work can have an adverse effect on type 2 diabetes. It can also put a person at higher risk of developing type 2 in the first place. Shift work, particularly that involving overnight and varying shifts, can make it more difficult to manage glucose levels. It doesn't really go on, but I just remembered hearing that there's something about is it this circadian rhythm?
It's the circadian rhythm, really. It's interesting because I just attended the ADA scientific sessions with our virtual conference. But some of the sessions that I did attend were specific to the circadian rhythm and sleep and appetite and weight management, which does relate to much more into type 2, but is also a realm of something that many people with type 1 try to manage really well too, right? Mm-hmm. So in terms of what they found is those who had a much more stable daytime structured schedule and they slept overnight, even if the sleep was not as good, but they had their normal sleep time in the overnight time where typical circadian rhythm kind of is meant to be. Yeah. They found that people had better weight management, mm-hmm. and had better glucose control.
Right.
The other piece to it was that with shift work in the picture, schedules are often very disrupted with shift work. It's not often that people have consistent enough schedule with a shift. Like I think of many of the nurses that I've worked with who have some shifts in some weeks that are an overnight shift. And then they've got several days off and then they go to a daytime shift. Mm-hmm. And then they've got several days off and then they go back to like the evening or the overnight shift, right? That's a complete disruption,
right,
to what your body is even trying to set as some type of stable schedule. Yeah. It doesn't happen. So in terms of like all management, it's really hard to then get a grasp on insulin doses. And or even use of medication, and food intake gets disrupted. Now you're eating at 2:00 in the morning because that's technically your lunch hour, when in 4 days from now, your lunch is going to be back at 12 or 1:00.
Okay. And that, I remember we've talked about that before too. That actually still impacts things like feet on the floor and stuff like that too. Like if you wake up at 3:00 in the morning, suddenly that feet on the floor impact is happening at that time of the day.
Absolutely.
And there's all that other stuff. That's really fascinating.
I mean, in terms of that, I even remember noticing that myself. If I would get up overnight for more than just a tuck a kid back in bed and then go back to bed myself, 5 minutes, I didn't get that impact. But if I was up with a fussy child or for nursing overnight or something like that, and I was up for enough of a period of time, I definitely saw that happen when otherwise overnights were flat.
I was just thinking about, have you ever been like gotten sick or exhausted and you fall asleep in the middle of the day and the sun's up and you're in a deep sleep?
Really? When does that happen?
Well,
I'm kidding.
Just remember back. There had to have happened to you at one point. And you wake up at
like
7:00 at night and it's dark. And it's the kind of dark where you're like, it could be midnight. It could be 2 a.m. I don't know what time it is. And it gives you that really horrible, strange feeling of like, you don't know where you are. It feels very disorienting, right?
Yes.
And the only way to fix it is to go back to sleep and wake up with the sun again.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, I have it here just, is it circadian?
Circadian.
Circadian rhythm or circadian cycle is a natural internal process that regulates the sleep-wake cycle and repeats roughly every 24 hours. It can refer to any process that originates with an organism. Okay, we don't care about that part, but the other thing there. And the only way I can relate to this, and I've had someone on recently to talk about it, is that I am very steadfastly eating within an intermittent fasting schedule. And it has really made a vast improvement on how I feel. When I spoke to Jen Stevens about it on the podcast, she was talking about, she talked about it as an eating window, not as like she didn't think of it as fasting as much. And so I'm just pretty much sticking to an 8-hour window.
Yep.
She told me if I take my window down to fewer hours, I'll start losing weight. And I haven't gotten to that part yet. I was waiting for the kids to go back to school. So we're getting up to that now. I'm going to shorten the window up a little bit. But basically, I'm not eating after the sun goes down. I'm 11 to 7-ish. I'm trying to eat around in that situation. And one of the things she talked about is why does that work for people for weight loss? And she said it lessens your need for insulin. So your body goes through big portions of the day where your body's not calling for insulin. Like it's the opposite of the idea of like eat small snacks all day long. She's like, I don't like that idea because your body's always using insulin. Now she was talking about, people who don't have diabetes or type 2s, how that could affect them. But then I realized Arden's a person who doesn't eat breakfast. So overall, like most of the time, like on a regular school day. So overall, Arden's eating in an intermittent fasting window, and she can fast with a stable blood sugar like no one I've ever seen in my life. Like, now that you're on the algorithm and you can see it, if Arden doesn't eat for 12 hours, Arden's blood sugar is just 80. It just is. And so I don't know that all those things fit together, but I think all the ideas fit in here somehow. The idea of being on that cycle and that your body works better in cycles and that it needs time off and time to do things. I mean, I'm obviously no expert, but all that makes sense to me somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the circadian rhythm, the hormone component in the overnight time period, I mean, they are all kind of tied in along with the intermittent fasting idea. In fact, one of the other ones that I listened into was all about like those who did the best weight management wise, kind of from short-term analysis to long-term, like a year out from having lost weight. And then what's the maintenance of that in terms of their ability to maintain. And some of them were doing intermittent fasting,
Okay.
but they did it. I also don't really like the fasting component because you're fasting in a given time period, but you're not really just not eating, right? I mean, people think of fasting as like 24 hours. You're just not eating anything. Really, you're just containing the time period. And they found that people that did intermittent fasting with breakfast being the bigger of the meal, lunch being a bit lighter, and the last meal of that time period, especially when it's eaten, I think it was before like 7 p.m., did the best with overall loss and then maintaining that loss compared to people who just shifted that eating time frame by about, I think it was a 3-hour chunk of time forward and ate later into the evening, but still within a time block that was an intermittent fasting, like I only eat within the 6-hour or 8-hour time period.
Yeah.
So the later eating tended to increase the risk of gaining weight back and or just not losing as much weight, which was interesting too.
The reason I brought it all up is because if you're sleeping on a pretty consistent schedule, then it makes sense that you'll be able to eat on a pretty consistent schedule.
Yes.
So, right.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mirror what you said in what I'm seeing, that first of all, it's easier to eat bigger in the beginning of the day because you've come out of a window where you haven't eaten for a while. That is the time I am the hungriest. Like I want to know, I don't wake up, like I haven't eaten yet. It's 11:51 and I'm not hungry. So, but I will go eat now when you and I are finished.
Sure.
And I will eat probably my larger meal of the day.
And it's in the day.
Yeah.
You're not putting it in the evening when you're less likely to be up and moving and going about your business. You're not going to bed on a really full stomach that your body then has to do something, digestion specifically, in a time period that is not meant to be doing that.
Yeah. Which I was going to say can affect your sleep, which is what we're talking about. And we've talked about it in a number of other episodes, leaves your body with the task of having to work on food and digest food at a time when it's trying to take away that process to do other things. So, yeah, you're basically asking your body to do something when it was getting ready to shut down that function and do other things.
Right.
So don't go to bed on a full stomach.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's an easy statement to say, harder to put into action.
Tough to do. Pizza's much better in the evening. It's just obvious. Okay. Can we do pump site placement?
Sure.
All right. So it always feels weird to start over when we do these strings of them. Because when I listen back to them and edit it, I hear myself go, "Hey, Jenny, today can we talk about pump site placement?" And
but we've really been talking for like 45 minutes already.
We've been talking forever. We've done like a bunch of these, like, and it feels silly. But anyway, hey, Jenny, can we talk about pump site placement today?
Absolutely.
Excellent. I'll probably just leave all that in so people know why I'm laughing. So it doesn't matter, right, if it's injected or pumps. There are just going to be places on a person's body that I don't know what to say. Does it absorb the insulin better? Does it use the insulin more efficiently? Like, how do we think about it?
I think they're both kind of the right way to say it, because honestly, underneath the skin, I mean, the goal is to have insulin absorb, right? And to get used in an efficient, like, pattern of in, gets used, goes out, is finished working. I mean, many people on pumps, I think, more than people using injections, will start to notice places on their body that definitely absorb the best, and other places that they get good use out of, but they might actually have to have a secondary basal profile that's notched up a little bit more because they just don't quite meet the same glucose targets with the same basal from, let's say, a stomach site versus a butt site, or, whatever it is. And then there are some people who can't use certain sites at all. I mean, I personally cannot use my leg. It just doesn't work for me. I either get occlusion alarms or the site hurts. And I've also noticed with that, then it's just not getting absorbed accurately enough, I guess, is the easiest way to kind of explain it. It's much less consistent absorption there. So I just don't use my legs.
Do you think that's because, do you think there's a reason to point to? Do you have like a stronger leg? Is it muscular?
For me, I truly believe it's because I just have pretty much just muscular legs. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've done biking and dance and lots of things over the years, and I continue to run and do yoga and bike. And right. I think it's that. Now, the interesting thing is that I can wear a sensor on my leg. No, I just can't put a pump site with insulin there.
Okay. Is there anything about, like, I've heard people say over the years, and I've never understood if it was true or not, like, I can't put my pump near like the, muscle in my thigh or towards a larger muscle, because the muscles, they feel like the way they say it is that the muscle's burning up the insulin, but I don't imagine that's, isn't it just that there's not enough like fatty tissue there to move it around, or no?
Well, muscles they've got a vascular nature to them, right? So they've got lots and lots of vessels that contribute to keeping the muscles doing what they're supposed to be doing and supplying nutrients and everything into the tissue, right? Whereas fat is just, I mean, you've probably seen pictures of like fat blobs, right? It's just like fat.
It's like human styrofoam balls.
Right. Yeah. Imagine a styrofoam ball. That's a good idea. So when you have insulin infusing pretty close to a muscle, let's say, and this is kind of general, you would expect potentially that you are going to get, if you haven't gotten occlusion from nicking a vessel and getting kind of a clot at the end of the cannula, then the muscle, because of the nature of vessels, you may actually get faster absorption in an area.
Okay. So
I've in particular noticed if I've ever had a site that has bled after I've taken the site out, but it wasn't really like, it wasn't painful. There was no reason to change it prior, but it just was one of those like gushers that you like pull out. And then I look back at the couple last days and I'll be like, yeah, my blood sugar looked pretty perfect. Like it was almost like I didn't have diabetes. Like it was just all working like so beautifully that I felt like this is just it. I'm just at like this beautiful like point, right? And then I see, oh, well, there's the reason. It was right next to my blood supply.
So you think, so that is almost like you're in a very tiny way mainlining the insulin a little bit.
And that's what I guess, yes. But it's actually just closer to the absorption line, because when we put a pump site or even inject insulin, you're supposed to be sub-Q, right? Underlying tissue, which is mostly it's like your thermal layer of protection for your body, right? That's where we're supposed to be absorbing insulin through. And thus the timeline of absorption for the trend in rapid insulin, regular insulin, long-term insulin, it's all based on how it's supposed to get absorbed and used through that time frame, through the tissue.
And so I think it's important here to mention that when you buy a pump, any pump, it's going to give you some instructions and tell you, here are the places you can wear your pump. All that means is that those are the places that the company who made the pump had the time and money to test so that they could prove to the FDA that these places worked. I'm sure that Omnipod probably isn't thrilled if I'm saying this, but you can put your pump somewhere else. Yes, you could try other places. I've seen from Chris Freeman wear it on his chest, when he's in the middle of, in the Olympics. And I've said it before, the guy's like, I don't know what his real body fat is, but he doesn't appear to have any. And it's on his pec. I've seen ladies wear them on their breast. I've seen people wear them on their hips, their thighs, their calves. I watched somebody do it on their forearm once as like a test, there's no place. I don't think there's any place where it isn't reasonable for you to try based on what I've seen from the community and from people in general. But you are going to find places that work better. But then I think that leads us into talking about, you can't have too much of a favorite place because you'll ruin it.
You have to rotate.
Yes,
it's very important to rotate.
Have to look at your sites and see. For Arden, they get a little, like if she's using them too much, I can start seeing them a little vascular, maybe like a little red on top. Like that's the first like sign from me. And then you can start rubbing you can rub your hand over top of it. If it gets bad, you can feel it, like it'll get lumpy or hard.
Yes.
Right. That kind of a thing. So yeah, you have to have places to go. And it is going to change then, like Jenny said, it could possibly change how much insulin you need. Arden just went off the side of her thigh to the top of her thigh. And I had to increase everything by about 20% for that, just from the side of her thigh to the top of her thigh. So, and I think too, for little kids, as long as we're talking about sites for a second, here's probably a good place to talk about when you start doing things with little kids or, sometimes adults, they build rules in their head. So that's where my pump goes. It can't go there because it goes there. I always wear it here. Kind of becomes a psychological thing at some points too, and then you'll see kids will fight against it. Like I can't put it on my arm. It goes on my leg.
Right.
Arden's 17 and I think she has it. I think she believes her CGM goes on her hips. Because that's where she likes it. It's where she likes it and it works fine and everything. And if I ever say to her, hey, why don't you try putting your pod on the back of your arm? It's a flat no. And it's only because, in my opinion, she remembers it being there in a softball game one day and we didn't think about it. And she threw and then the pod like yanked on her arm as she came across. Oh. She had a bad memory of it. And now even years later, she's not throwing a softball anymore. Years later, she has an aversion to putting it on her arm. So
sure. So there's like an associated kind of experience there.
Yeah, and then it comes out as this is where it goes, and I will fight to the death to keep it here. And then you run into a problem where you don't have ways to rotate sites.
Yes,
and then you're going to run into a problem. And the way I've always put it to Arden is, look, you keep putting it there, and one day you're not going to be able to use that spot at all. And that's the thing that helps her move around. Now, I think the other good thing to talk about that is, I really have experience with the Omnipod, but sometimes it's just as simple as turning it 180 degrees. Like you really like it on your abdomen, great. Have it point towards your belly button this time and have it point towards your side the next time.
Yes.
Those are two different sites still.
Well, and I do the same thing, especially for backs of the arms, which for many little kids, because especially for tiny little kids who really don't have a lot of tissue or are very, very averse to having it on their abdomen for some reason, then that back of the arm, like you said, it's essentially just turning the pod with that viewing window facing up versus the next time turning it with the viewing window facing down. Mm-hmm. So you technically then even have two sites on the back of each little arm that you could potentially use, which makes 4 places between 2 arms. And at assumedly 3 days per site, it's a fair amount of days before you get back to site number 1 on the first arm.
Do you think specifically on Omnipod, you use it vertically on limbs, right?
Correct. Yeah. Perpendicular up and down with the viewing window, either facing the sky or facing the floor on limbs. Exactly. And then on like your torso region or your upper butt, you would use it in sort of a horizontal fashion.
Is that because of just the nature of the shape of the pod? Yeah.
That's from what I know, it's based on the comfort wear of the pod itself. Right. Yes.
Do you know a second ago, because I didn't want to look stupid, I just checked that vertical meant up and down. Like I Googled it right before I said it. And then it made me feel so much better because the rest of the world doesn't know either. It's a very popularly Googled thing. Is horizontal left and right? Is vertical up and down? What is vertical? What does a vertical line look like? We all
That's pretty funny, Scott.
Paid closer attention in school, apparently. Is there anything about this that we didn't cover?
I don't think so. I think in terms of site, you covered, all the places that are approved versus the ones that people are trying, not necessarily approved. So yes.
But it's a variable because you are going to get it in your head that these are my settings, and then you're going to move the site somewhere else. And then you start, I love it. People immediately go, this pump doesn't work. That's always my favorite reaction to everything.
right? And I've got a number, I mean, as a secondary to that, site to site, I've got a number of people, myself included, before using, the system that I actually use. I actually just had separate basal profiles that I would use from one site to the next. More specifically, all the body sites on me work pretty much the same except for my upper butt. Mm-hmm. My upper butt just seemed to need more insulin whenever I used it. So I had a profile that was specific to that.
Yeah.
So
do you think that, and then I'll let you go, but do you think that the advent of G7 Dexcom, like when it changes form factor, I keep thinking people are going to start trying like a lot of different places because it's going to be easier to put in different places all the time?
Probably. Yeah. I would expect, yes. Yeah. I mean, as it is, a lot of people are wearing their CGMs on places that I would honestly, like I've seen it on their forearms. I've seen it like places I would never think of popping it in, but if you're getting accurate results, I guess.
I have to admit, there are times I see those pictures and this is exactly what I think. And I'm just going to have to bleep this out. I think, man, get bored, huh?
Yeah,
I wonder if we can make it work here. I'm going to try.
Well, I know. I don't even have it's all muscle there. I don't know where it would sit under my skin. I would hit something and it would be immediate pain or blood.
I just think of those people as they're explorers. They're just like, I wonder what'll happen if I walk across Antarctica.
Yeah,
let's go find out.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Go find out. Exactly.
I'm not doing it, but whatever. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
First, I'm going to thank the Contour Next One blood glucose meter and remind you to go to contournext.com/juicebox. There are also links in the show notes of your podcast player and links at juiceboxpodcast.com. Thank you very much for visiting with the sponsors. I appreciate it. Thanks also to Jenny for being here. Thank you so much, Jenny. We love talking to you. At least I do. I think I'm speaking for everyone else. But in fairness, some people might hate your guts. I have no idea. Is it possible that anyone doesn't like Jenny? I don't think so. Thank you so much for listening. There are way more variables. Go check them out at juiceboxpodcast.com or right there in your podcast player. I really appreciate you listening and supporting the Juicebox Podcast. Tell a friend. That is my least favorite part of making the podcast, asking you to tell somebody else. Don't forget to subscribe in your app. I feel like an idiot having to say that. It's like I see a YouTube video, and they're like, hit the bell, do the thing. And I'm like, oh, this is so sad. And then I come here and I have to do it here. And it's hard to get people to listen to things and subscribe. And, it takes so much for them to learn that the content's there and that it really might be valuable for them. So then I end up saying just please tell someone who else, and it's just, I don't know, it makes me feel weird. I don't like it, but I do it because it is important. So thank you so much for listening, for supporting the show. If you know somebody else who you think might enjoy the show also, please share it with them. Show them how to start listening. Podcasts are not intuitive for everyone. Subscribe in your apps, people. I just did it. I was like, hit the bell. Ding. You know what? I haven't mentioned this in a little bit. The Facebook page is really great. No joking. Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes on Facebook. It's a private group with, I think it's got 16,000 people in it now. Everyone's talking about diabetes. It's a really un-Facebook-like experience. So that is to say, it's a good experience with a lot of great people. Check it out.